All right, I'm alive. So, what I'm going to do, as I always do, is wait a few minutes till all of you come in. It's an audio live this time, which works better on Wi Fi. So, if you're there, please let me know in the live chat. Let me know if you can hear me clearly. Thank you very much. All right. Marcus Art, thank you for being here. Pure Aim, thank you for being here. Evelyn, thank you for being here. That's good. So, the verse for today, or the verse I'm I'm going to use as a lead now is John chapter 10, verse 10. And I'm looking it up right now and I'm putting it in the live chat because it's a very famous thing that Christ said. Hold on. So here it is. In John chapter 10, verse 10, when Christ revealed that he is the good shepherd, this is what he said. The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I've come that they may have life and they may have it more abundantly. So life and abundance is what Christ came to bring. So, soon to rise, thank you for being here. Understand the following. Understand this very well. The world is under the grip of the thief. Who's the thief? Satan is. Satan does not rule all evil because he doesn't have the ability to, but he is credited all evil because he is the one, he's the chief reprobate that persisted in evil. So everyone that joins the dark side gives credit to Satan. That's why he's called the God of this world. He's not a God, but he's treated as a God by the world. Okay? So there are evil powers out there. As a fragile human being, you don't have that many options. Unless you are born again, you walk in the power. So, unless you're born again and you have the Holy Spirit inside of you, you are trapped by the powers of darkness, one way or the other. So every unbeliever out there that thinks that they can just make the right decisions and that they have control over their lives, first of all, that whole concept of their lives or privacy does not even exist. Their illusion of control is a delusion. So they're already trapped in darkness because they think they have control to begin with, and they think they're entitled to control. And they think that they have the right to look down on other people who can't manage life the way they do. So they are triple in deception. So every human being that's not born again falls under the grip of the enemy, whether directly or indirectly. I'm not saying that every human being that's unsaved is automatically an evil reprobate. No. But every human being in this lifetime that's not born again, they fall under the grip of the thief. And what does the thief do? The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. And society is a worldly construct, and the world is under the grip of the enemy. So fallen mankind, is also how you can call the world, is under the grip of Satan. So that means that fallen mankind is raised to kill, steal, and destroy. So fallen mankind has been raised by society to kill, steal, and destroy. However, they're not allowed to kill, steal, and destroy on their own. They have to kill, steal, and destroy together with the group. When you kill, steal, and destroy on your own, you're called a psychopath. and you're put in prison or you're executed. If you kill, steal, destroy together with the group towards the victims of the group, then you are a good citizen. That's how society works. Very simple. So let me repeat it. Fallen mankind is raised by the world to kill, steal, and destroy with the group. If you kill, steal, destroy with the group, you are rewarded. If you kill, steal, destroy on your own, you're called a psychopath and you're put in prison or you're executed. So the thief doesn't come except to steal, kill, and destroy. That means that all worldlings were trained and raised to enable the killing, stealing, and destroying of society. So all of us were trained and raised to enable and to excuse the killing, stealing, and destroying of society. That's how simple it is. We stopped being enablers the moment we were being renewed in our minds. And you can only be renewed in your mind after becoming born again. So before you became born again, you were raised to be an enabler of the killing, stealing, and destruction of fallen mankind. Do you understand what I've just explained? Let me know in the live chat. So, the only time you stopped being an enabler of society's violence is the moment you actively began to agree with Christ. But a lot of people don't want to see it as it is. They want to see themselves as good people because they don't cause them much harm. Now listen, even if you're not a rapist, even if you're not a murderer, even if you're not a pathological liar, even if you're not a gossiper nor a backbiter, the fact that you had self-occupied ways of thinking, which are self-destructive, and the fact that you had no choice but to get along with society because you were under the threat and the violence of society, that shows that whether you want it or not, you ended up enabling society just to survive. Because if you spoke out against society's violence, the group would turn on you. So either you were under the threat of society and you were in denial, or you were fully aware of it, and that's why you wanted to get out as soon as possible. That's how you found Christ, or better said, Christ found you. Because to be part of the world implies that you keep your mouth shut, you deny what you see and what you hear, and you only repeat what the group wants to hear. That is what it means to be part of society. And all of us were raised to be enablers of society's narcissism. All of us. But because many of us are so invested in how we were raised, we're so invested in having manners and being respectful, we don't want to see that we are enabling the violence of the world. We don't want to see that. Because the moment we see that, then we need to give up our investments. And too often we're so into our own investments that we end up turning a blind eye to what we are enabling. And here's the thing, whether you're aware that you're enabling evil or you are not aware of it, doesn't matter, it's still enabling. If you're completely unaware that you're enabling evil, evil is still being enabled. And that's why you have pagan Christianity to trick people into enabling Satan. Because most people would not willfully or willingly enable evil. Most people think, no, I can't do that. But if you trick them that there's a good reason for enabling evil, because some good will come out of it, then you got them. So this is how society does it. They trigger your urge for it, to escape by offering you a way out of facing yourself. And once you fall for that hook, you're in. That is the reason why so many people remain trapped for decades in dangerous relationships. They're bound to reprobates for decades and they're not even aware. And the bait is very easy. You want to be left alone, you just want to avoid difficulty and just have things easy all the time. The world offers you a way to get it. The group threatens you. You don't want to be threatened. You give in to what the group wants, and then you join a group into dumping on the victims. And then, because the group is so excited with dumping on the victims, they forget all about you, and you're left alone. That is the bait society offers us. And few of us saw through the bait. Many of us, it was after years of things backfiring on us, we realized, okay, we were baited, we were scammed. Now look at this. The administrators of the United States in the 1830s, look at this. In 1763, the Native Americans chose the side of the British, and the French were expelled from North America for the most part. Only French migrants remained behind. Well, the Native Americans joined the British. Later, many of the British wanted, at least the British administrators, wanted independence. They established the United States of America. And the United States of America increased to occupy a big portion of North America. Now the British descendants of those same people that the natives helped, I would say, 70 years earlier, they turned on the Native Americans. I'm not sure it was Andrew Jackson, but anyway, there was this one American president, US president, that signed a law in 1830 that caused the confiscation of most of the land of Native Americans. And then you had white migrants coming all the way from Europe to occupy that land. And those white migrants were told you're allowed to carry guns and protect your private property. And it's this mindset of private property that's still left in American culture. There's one thing about US society is private property is a god. Don't touch private property. If you don't validate private property, people go off at you. There are even black folks that fall for this thing. I'm telling you where this whole holding on to private property came from. It was in 1830 when the British administrators, we will not call themselves Americans. Americans just a label, but now you can say the American administrators of the United States of America, which was a white supremacist stronghold, they said, let's say 40, 50 years earlier, they said that they wanted a country specifically only for white folks in North America. So in 1830, they wanted to remove land from Native Americans so that white migrants from Europe could occupy the land. So what happened now was that when this happened, the white migrants that came to North America, they knew full well that the land they would occupy was achieved by bloodshed. But they had to pretend that they were hardworking Christians, that therefore having the land was a reward from the Heavenly Father, which was not true at all. So this hoax of covering up the massacre and genocide of Native Americans, that cover-up is this clinging onto private property in American culture. And here's the thing, because the land was acquired by bloodshed, the negative tension of the bloodshed began to haunt those people that took possession of the land. And that's why you had the Wild Wild West era, the cowboy era, in which many white folks turned on each other in lawlessness and began to kill one another. The massacre done to Native Americans began to haunt them when they chose to take part of the deal. Because the deal of the United States was, we kill off the Native Americans, take their land, and now white folks can flee from Europe and become wealthy over here. The white folks that fell for the bait thought they could get away with it, but they couldn't get away with it. So eventually, many ended up leaving the land they occupied, and they moved to the California, which left the Mexican Federation, became part of the United States. And that history shows you one thing. When Satan offers you a deal, it's not really a deal he's offering you. He's tricking you into his ruin and his misery. But because it's a short-term relief offered in the form of land or money or parties or whatever, you think you got a good deal. But here's the thing, Satan always comes to collect. So man, those white migrants from the Netherlands, the Denmark, Norway, Sweden, United Kingdom, which included Ireland back then, or from the German kingdoms, or from what was left of the Polish people, many of them came to the United States knowing full well that there was a massacre going on of Native Americans. This was news worldwide. It wasn't something in secret that happened. It was known worldwide this was going on. And look at this. The British Empire was against this. And the British took action against the United States economically. So eventually, the British kin of the British kin, which were not called Americans, had to stop the massacre of Native Americans. And it's because of the actions, the maritime and military actions of the British Empire, that the Native Americans were not completely genocided. I'm not saying that the British Empire therefore was a good thing, no. But the British in London realized, hold on a minute, we agreed to those British folks that we would recognize the United States of America if they would respect and honor the natives of America. But now they're not doing it. There was a war in 1812, also triggered by this, and now there was a threat of another war against the United States. And the United States knew very well if the British Empire would attack them, they would not be able to survive it. So they had to cool down with their massacres of Native Americans. That was the only reason they cooled down. Okay? And for a long part, many of the Native Americans in the United States fled to Canada or to Mexico. Not all could flee. And the reason why this overtook the Native Americans so swiftly was because the Native Americans were always included in British rule. And when the United States of America came into being, the Americans told the native kings, you'll be part of our administration, don't worry. But little by little, they turned on the Native Americans out of the blue. So all those white migrants, all those Europeans that came to the United States of America, knowing full well that they would be participating in a mass theft, they knew what they were getting themselves into. When they arrived there, and their children, grandchildren, the children and grandchildren who were born there knew what their family got themselves into. So they knew about the curses, and the curses were working out. Yet many white scapegoats from American society that began to haunt those European migrants, because you had those Americans who were born there for generations since American independence. They were upset that all those white migrants suddenly came to America and they didn't want to speak English. So you had a lot of conflicts amongst white folks, and they ended up shooting one another like crazy. And the United States government had no grip on those white dogs going crazy. So this was the curse they inherited. And here's the thing. By the way, thank you, Maria Garcia, for your super chat donations. Very much appreciated. Mexico, and the country Mexico, is really a continuation of the former Viceroyalty of New Spain, which was a Spanish jurisdiction. Most of North America, including from the Mississippi all the way to Alaska, used to be Spanish. It was Spain. And it was governed from Mexico City as the Viceroyalty of New Spain. And the Viceroyalty of New Spain contained out of autonomous kingdoms that went all the way from Alaska all the way to Panama, which included the Caribbean islands of Cuba, Puerto Rico, Santo Domingo, and you name it. The Virgin Islands were also Spanish territory back then. And the Viceroyalty of New Spain also ruled the Philippines, which was another kingdom all the way in Asia. So North America was stable for centuries, though to Spain, because the French didn't really do much. When the French dominated North America, it was Spain that assisted them. So the Spanish kept stability in North America. When the United States became bigger, they turned on the Native Americans. So that's why we go to Mexico and many of the other Latin American countries. You still see a lot of native folks over there, because under Spanish rule, the natives were more protected. Under American rule, they were exterminated. And here's the thing: when they confiscated all that land from the Native Americans, it was mostly in the Midwest also that was used to be governed by Spain. Now, the Louisiana territory was conceded by Spain to France quickly, and France sold it to the United States. So that was a while back already. But still, Mexico, as a republic, still had a big portion of the west coast of North America. And the United States initiated a war and took half of Mexican territory. And when that happened in 1848, they also began to take away land of the natives that lived under the Mexican Republic or the Mexican Federation. So when they tell you go back to Mexico, here's the thing: why don't they get out of Mexico by giving Mexican territory back? They won't do that. But here's the thing: the reason I'm talking about this whole American situation, because it illustrates it perfectly. You cannot get into a bargain with Satan and win in the long term. It's never going to happen. And look at this. As I mentioned before, unless you're born again, you fall under the grip of the thief, which is Satan. So as long as you're under the grip of darkness, the only thing you have are null movements. A null movement, the word null means already it's an empty movement. It's a movement that doesn't benefit you in the long run, but only appears to benefit you. It's a movement that will crash eventually. So all what society promises you is a null movement. It's a promise that cannot be fulfilled. And whatever you get out of that promise will not last for you, nor will it be beneficial for you in the long run. You can also call it a circular movement, indeed. So the world never moves on. There's one thing that you can be guaranteed about. The world cannot move on because the world is trapped in patterns and cycles. The world is one and all patterns and cycles. And a pattern and a cycle is always a repetitive pattern. So a repetitive pattern doesn't go anywhere. A circle is a circle. However you move on a circle, you always end up in the same place because it's a circle. So the world cannot move on. So moving on does not exist for the world. And look at this. Because I know about colonial history a lot. Okay? I even went online to check archive documents. You have pamphlets and newspapers of the 18th century online. They're scanned in that you can see. So I know about history. Okay? And let me tell you one thing. When I check human history, there's nothing racial about it, say just facts. Europeans have exported their issues all over the earth. And the whole world has now been stuck in the issues of Europeans. Let me explain why. For example, you had England, Scotland, and Ireland, 3 kingdoms all governed by the King of England. Okay, that's their arrangement. 3 countries governed by the same king. In England, there were conflicts about land ownership and debt. Okay? So, what happened was that in England, there was a conflict now about how much the king had to say and how much Parliament could say. There were English colonies and also Scottish colonies, because Scotland was a separate country from England still. It was not Great Britain yet. Great Britain came into being, I believe, in 1707, if I'm correct, when they unified both administrations. So when you had English and Scottish colonies in the Caribbean, also North America, the discussion about Parliament also played a role amongst them. Now look at this. It was only relevant to the white folks from Britain. It was not relevant to the black slaves that were living there, nor for the natives in the Caribbean, nor in the Americas. But look what happened. When conflict broke out into civil war in England, Scotland also became involved in civil war, Ireland also, understandable. They were all managed from the British Parliament. But what happened now? Yet English folks and Scottish folks in the Caribbean and in North America also turning on one another. So now in North America, whether it's on mainland North America or whether it's in the Caribbean, you had civil war of white folks against each other. And the natives of America were dragged into it, as well as the black slaves. If you think this was only one time, let's move further in history. You had the Dutch Republic, and you had Great Britain. Oh, by this time it's called the United Kingdom already. You had the Cape Colony. Cape Colony was just a Dutch colony in what today called Cape Town of South Africa. And from Cape Town, the Dutch had many other towns established in the south of Africa. So you had many Dutch migrants that fled from Europe and moved and lived in South Africa. That's why Afrikaans looks so much like Dutch, because it's derived from Dutch. So you had the Dutch white population in South Africa living besides the Zulu tribes and the other African tribes. It was relatively in harmony. Then the British Navy came and wanted to take it over. They had a fight over there. And this later involved the African tribes over there. Now hold on a minute. London, from which the British Empire was governed, and The Hague, from which the Dutch Empire was governed, are quite close in Europe. Look at the map. From London, you could take a sail ship, and within less than a day or 2 days, you would have crossed the North Sea and you would be in The Hague. The other way around also. So why didn't the British go to The Hague and bitch and fight with the Dutch? Why did they send ships all the way to South Africa to have a big fight over there? Couldn't they keep their conflicts in Europe? During the colonial era, Europeans got relief by exporting all their conflicts all over the world. And everyone worldwide became involved in their conflicts. And that is how the world has remained till this day. So just because you don't see the British flag everywhere, or the French flag, or the Spanish flag in many places, doesn't mean that all the afflictions of this era are over. They're not. Just because today many African places are their own countries doesn't mean that the conflict is over. Because look at this. In the 19th century, the Europeans divided Africa into a French part, British part, and all of it. So Africans that fell under the French part had to learn French. Africans that fell under the British part had to learn English. Africans that fell under the I would say the Italian part had to learn Italian. So when you look at it, after the colonial administrations were forfeited, the Africans were left with European languages that they spoke, and all the conflicts, because the French had conflicts with the British with the French, and they enforced those conflicts into the policies in Africa. So when the colonial administrators left, those conflicts were left, and now the Africans had to deal with those conflicts were left over there. So now we have people saying to black folks, whether they're from mainland Africa or they're from African diaspora, to just move on from colonialism. But hold on. How can you move on from something that has never been resolved? And how can you move away from something that not only has it never been resolved, but the ones that caused it, their descendants are continuing the same pattern? So when they tell black folks that they need to move on from slavery and colonization, they're actually gaslighting us and putting a spell on us to stop complaining about the consequences. The same thing they do to the Native Americans. The same thing they do to other white folks who also complain. So this whole mentality, just move on, it is a hoax. The world cannot move on. And I'll be frank here. Those colonial conflicts that Europeans afflict on the world, many of them are not going to go away until Christ returns. They're too deep-rooted in many people. And here's the thing, the pattern of deporting their issues was also taken over by the United States. The United States has its own oil fields of land robbed from the Native Americans. So why aren't they using the oil fields around the Great Lakes? Why aren't they doing it? Why do they go all the way to Iran or to Iraq or to other places just to occupy the area to drain the oil? It is because there's a lot of conflict amongst white supremacists who has the right to control, whether it's liberal white supremacists or Republican white supremacists. They have conflicts. So now they play out their conflict into capitalism. So you have various companies going to the Middle East to exploit the oil over there, and all those companies are competing with one another. So they're fighting out their conflicts while draining the resources of other people. Yet they tell Muslims just to move on. Move on from what? Look, there's not an anti-European rant over here. I'm just pointing out history and how things work out. The beast system, which is a Greek white supremacist sodomite system, is the same system as it was in ancient Greece, is the same that was in the Roman Empire, and the same that will be here till Christ returns. So we'll have to deal with this beast till Christ returns. All right? So we need to know how the beast operates so that we know how to bypass and outsmart the beast. Do you understand what I've just explained? Let me know in the live chat. Now look at this. When European ancestors were fighting out their civil wars in the Americas, when they were acting out their issues all over the earth, and the people were complaining, they were ignored. But now you have many migrants living in Europe and in North America in the white areas, and their conflicts from their homelands are playing out. Now they're saying, go back to your own country, leave us alone. You guys always have issues. Why can't you go to your neighbors to fix it? Why do we have to be bothered by that? But hold on a minute. Till this day, Europeans have this cultural code that they deport their issues worldwide. That rainbow community out there, you know which community I'm talking about, that seeks to validate alternative sexual lifestyles. That rainbow community came forth out of sexual disharmony amongst Europeans. It was so prevalent that they didn't want to address it. It was so big that they eventually turned it into a movement just so that they didn't have to face the amount of sexual violence they enabled amongst their own. And now they're using that as a so-called movement of empowerment to put those rainbow flags all over the earth. So the same thing that was going on in the colonial era, deporting their issues, the same thing they're doing till this day. That is what they're doing. And Africa is not having it. That's why in Africa, they will tolerate some rainbow flags here and there if it's remote, but will not tolerate indoctrination of children into that. In the Western world, now you have children of 6, 7-year-old learning about anal sex. I'm sorry, but sexual development starts around age 10 or 11 when they're in their teens. So what's a child whose sexual development hasn't even started yet? What business has he or she learning about unnatural sex acts? And in some primary schools, they show porn videos, gay porn, to teach children about anal sex. What is that? That you have grown men who have sex issues, let them look for a therapist, or if they don't want help, let them ruin one another in their private clubs and all of that. That's on them. But do not afflict the children with it just because you don't want to face yourself. And now, worldwide, they want to make it mandatory for children to see gay porn, to learn about sexual diversity. What the F is that? And here's another thing. White supremacy does not care about white people at all. They don't. So it's not an ethnic issue. It's a satanic issue. White supremacists are core devil worshippers. They don't care about anyone. If they did, they would never allow that rainbow community to even exist. Just think about it. You have this rainbow community that is afflicting children with gay porn under the guise of education. They come with policies that are harmful to the youth. And most of the advocates for this mess are sodomite white males. Where are the proud white supremacists with their guns right now? Why do they go to those sodomite white men and tell them, listen, don't put your garbage on our children, you hear me? We have white pride. We don't allow our white children to be harmed like that. Where's their pride now? It's nowhere to be found. White supremacists in the United States say they want to keep their guns to protect themselves against the government. Hold on a minute. The United States government, or the United States as an administration, is a white supremacist administration from the start, governed by white folks. And now you have white supremacists saying we need guns to protect ourselves against a white supremacist structure that's there for us. So hold on a minute. So you have a white supremacist structure that's there for you, but you guys need guns to protect yourself against structure that's there for you. So you see now the white supremacists are mentally ill. They're divided. Why do you need guns to protect yourself against your own leaders that represent your so-called supremacy? And here's the thing. White supremacists invest so much in Persian arms. They have a whole industry of arms, legal and illegal. Why don't they use all that money and all those assets to end homelessness amongst white folks, whether in North America or in Europe or in Australia, whatever? They have the ability to bail out every white individual from poverty and from homelessness. They do. But they prefer to use all their efforts into having an ammunition industry, Persian guns to fight against other white folks they don't trust. So white supremacy is a suicide cult. That's all it is. White supremacy is a suicide cult. They don't care about anything nor anyone. They don't even care about themselves. If they cared about themselves, would have realized, you know what? Having all those guns easily available around here, some crazy guy may pick a gun and start shooting people. And that happened a lot. So you know what? Let's collect all those guns, melt them, and build other stuff with it just to be more constructive to our own communities. They don't. They do not. Their ancestors dropped their issues all over the place, and they're fighting out the issues of their ancestors. That's how it goes. And here's another thing about this white supremacy structure, is that every century, at least twice, it crashes. In the 17th century, you had a whole escalation in 1672, in which white supremacist administrators went off with one another because they were envious with the Dutch white supremacists. They had no harmony amongst their own. So the Dutch white supremacists were so rich that other white supremacists were upset, thinking, why are the Dutch so rich? We need to deal with the Dutch. And they dealt with the Dutch, but then it was a big crash. But Spain continued by resetting the world's economy. Earlier in that century, somewhere in the beginning, yet another crash had happened. This time between France and some other place. Going to the 18th century, you had this big, you had the conflicts in Britain, of course, we know about that. But then you had a very big conflict emerge in Europe because there was one white supremacist royal house that gained too much influence through marriage, and this led to common white folks fighting off each other, and the fights escalated that all over the world, white folks began to attack one another, and they used the wars in Europe as an excuse to attack one another. You had French sailors attacking British sailors. You had French migrants attacking other French migrants who didn't agree with the French government all the way in Europe, even though they lived in North America or they lived wherever they were. But what happened in 1763, the Native Americans bailed them out. But what happened later? 70 years later, Andrew Jackson signed that bill and he turned on Native Americans. That's the thank you Native Americans got a few generations later. Okay, let's go to the 19th century. You had this big crash of the Spanish Empire because they didn't want to accept black folks as equal Spaniards. That crashed completely. It crashed completely. But they were built out by desperate black folks that thought, you know what, we can make this work. It didn't. It did not. Then you had the American Civil War, which was another white supremacist crash. This time, black Americans would join the Union, and those from the South would join the North. They won the conflict, the Civil War, for the Union. And instead of turning on the Union and avenging their ancestors, they thought, you know what, let's continue in peace. So the black veterans of the American Civil War built out white supremacy right over there. Boy, what happened afterwards? Oh, all their black businesses were looted, destroyed, and whatever. Going to the 20th century. First World War. Second World War. At the Second World War, it were Muslims all over the world that came and built them out from the consequences. So when you look at it, white supremacy always goes towards self-destruction. But every time they are at the height of self-destruction, somewhere, some group of people of the world feel sympathy and pity for them and builds them out. And I'm telling you right now, nobody should build those creeps out. White people shouldn't build them out. Blacks shouldn't build out. Asians shouldn't. Arabs shouldn't. Nobody should build them out. Because every group that built them out in history received a backlash in return. Because by bailing them out of the consequences of their self-destruction, you're actually assisting Satan. And as I mentioned before, there is no such thing as getting embarking with Satan and it benefiting you in the long run. It will never work. It will never work. I could see Asians spilling out white supremacy right now, but I hope they don't. And here's the good news. Muslims are not willing to build them out anymore after all the crap they've done in the Middle East via the United States. Blacks have woken up to the police genocide in the United States and think we're not going to build you guys out. And Africa is already playing, we're not going to take this anymore. Hispanics, I'm not sure about them, but Asians are quite whitewashed mentally. They may seek to build them out. I hope they don't. But that's how it always goes. And that's why we need to know what the beast is so we don't end up bailing out the beast. Don't bail out the beast. Because the beast will turn on you once you bail it out. Look, it's not about skin color nor ethnicity. The beast system is it is Satan's administration. They don't care about anyone nor anything. And colonial history has shown us, don't build them out. And look at this. White supremacy has done a lot of dirt to Asia. The Japanese Empire was a white supremacist stronghold, powered by the British Empire. They won't tell you that in history books. So all the horror that the Japanese military did on Asia in the Second World War, it was powered by the British Empire, which was the leader in the world at the time. The British Empire both powered Nazi Germany as well as the Japanese Empire. That's why after the Second World War, everyone wanted the British flags to be gone. That's why the British Empire collapsed very quickly, because nobody wanted them around anymore. Yet, because the United States took over the role of Britain, people forgot about Britain, and now you still have white men speaking English that are dominant, and the whitewashing continued in Asia. I hope and pray that the Asians wake up and don't bail it out, because if they bail out the conflicts in white supremacy right now, within 20 to 30 years, there will be genocides in Asia caused by that same white supremacist structure. They will reap it. Black folks made that mistake. We're not making it again, absolutely not. Native Americans made that mistake, and fortunately, there is a remnant left to regret it. Muslims did, and many today are crying because their ancestors did it during the Second World War. Moroccans kicked the behind of Nazis in the Netherlands, in Italy, in France, in Belgium. They did a lot to free the Netherlands from the terror of the Nazis. But if you go to the Netherlands today, a lot of people cry, "Less Moroccans, please." So the descendants and the relatives of the Moroccans that fought for white supremacy, they are now being trashed upon. Do not bail out the beast. And there's the thing. There is no such thing as moving on in the world. The world is just a cycle that repeats itself in later generations. So what happened in the United States with the storming of the Capitol and all the threats that was going on is just another crisis of white supremacy. And that crisis is not over yet. We still have to see how it plays out under Joe Biden's administration, Joe Biden's presidency. But hey, Asians, if you listen to this right now, don't build those folks out. Let them crash in their own conflicts once and for always. So realize that in the world, there is no moving on. Because the thing, moving on means simply you continue. Continue in what? Continue in a cycle. So the world is a cycle that repeats itself. So when you are in a phase where there's an escalation, people want to move on away from the escalation to the honeymoon phase. And from honeymoon phase, you'll end up in escalation again. That's what moving on means. Moving on literally means continue in the cycle. If you're in a phase of collapse, move on to the honeymoon phase. That's what the world is doing. They always want to chase the honeymoon phase. And often are in denial when they are in the escalation phase. So when people in the world tell you to move on, just don't get into conflict with them. Just pretend like you understood them. Just move on. And just you literally move away from them. Because there is no moving on unless you walk in life in abundance. If you don't have life nor abundance, there's no moving on, moving out. Let me phrase better. You don't move on, you move out. If you're stuck in prison, you move out of the prison. You don't move on in the prison. Because if you move on in the prison, you're still in the prison. You move out of the prison. We as believers, we've moved out of the violence of the world. We've moved out. And because we're out, we are living. If you don't move out, that means you're moving on in the fright. Because you're always under a threat in the world that you need to escape from. So you're as a rat on a windmill spinning and spinning. So you're moving on while you're spinning. Now we don't move on spinning to avoid stuff. We've moved out. of the violence of the world. So that is why I always urge you believers to operate in life and abundance, to establish your own local economies, and to be economically and culturally relevant as Christ commanded us to be. Because that's what we're supposed to do anyway. There's no use protesting and fighting the beast to be more humane. The beast is the beast. It will always be the beast till it's terminated to the lake of fire. So to protest and to negotiate with the beast is a foolish thing to do. Look, you don't negotiate with a demon because it's still going to be a demon at the end of the day. You're still dealing with a fallen creature, with a fallen, debased creature, which is a demon. So if you think negotiating with a demon will turn him into an angel, you're out of your mind. You can't negotiate with Satan out of Satan's violence, because Satan is all about violence. So how are you going to how do you expect Satan to advise you how to leave his violence if he's all about keeping you in violence? It's not going to happen. And you know what? I use the Chinese diaspora often as an example in my live streams. I'm doing it one more time. Because there's one thing about the Chinese diaspora that I really praise about them. And we as believers should be far more advanced than the Chinese diaspora. Forget about the Li dynasty. Forget about the triads and the Chinese mafia and all of that crap. The Chinese diaspora, they have the collective understanding that on their own, they can be marginalized and even persecuted or afflicted by the rest of the world. So what do Chinese folks do overseas? They construct Chinese restaurants, Chinese pharmacies, Chinese supermarkets. They build Chinese businesses overseas, and they get assistance from the Chinese criminal world. And because of all of this, wherever you go, there are Chinatowns, and Chinatowns trade with one another. So Chinese people, if it would be a meltdown worldwide right now, the Chinese diaspora would be able to at least last for a decade or two together. That's how well structured the Chinese diaspora is. And should we believers that are well organized like that? The Chinese diaspora, if it's a meltdown worldwide right now, the Chinese diaspora can easily continue. Despite being conflicts between mainland China and Taiwan, when it comes down to it, Chinese people realize, okay, we're from Chinese ethnicity. And when it comes down to it, in the 20th century, white supremacy was dividing China. You had a British zone, French zone, Japanese zone, Belgian zone, Dutch zone. So they were dividing our country. So the Chinese know their history that white supremacy would divide them anytime they can. So to the Chinese worldwide realize, you know what? Instead of just helping white folks with colonialism, let's build our own economic structure worldwide. So if the Chinese diaspora, powered by paranormal aid, guarded by the Chinese criminal world, if they can have a worldwide financial and economic network that can keep them going, even if it's a meltdown worldwide, I'm sorry, but that's an embarrassment to many believers worldwide who still hold on to pagan churches. We should be the ones having so many financial and economic assets worldwide that even if the Babylonian system would fully go retard against us, we would be at ease with our families and our communities, living life at ease, enjoying life in abundance as Christ intended to be. And we will get to the point that this will happen. That's why the beast will retaliate and destroy itself completely before Christ returns. I'm in the point in time appointed by the Heavenly Father to push us in that direction. So that is why I tell you always to check the context of what goes on in your life. Oh, Chuba said something very important. Chuba said, during this COVID thing, when all hell broke loose, why didn't the pagan churches help people? Praise the Lord, you see it. Because now you see what pagan church is meant to do. Pagan church doesn't solve anything. Pagan church just keeps people in a loop of negativity. That's all pagan church does. And here's the thing. Where are the solutions from pagan church for this COVID-19 pandemic? Where are they? They're nowhere to be found. So, instead of being terrified by hoaxes of pagan Christianity about what the mark of the beast so-called is, but it's not, we should be just being occupied till Christ comes. If we do that, the power keeps working through us and we overcome whatever the world throws at us. And I already told about the black churches, how they are coon centers and how we should stop enabling them. I spoke about that before. And during this COVID-19 pandemic, as is revealed already, those black pastors of those black churches in the United States primarily, they are coons, powerful mad sellouts who only scam the black folks to get rich at the black folks' expense. That's what they're doing. That's all they're doing. I've explained in my previous live stream how this how to say Ponzi scheme of pagan Christianity works. They build funds and they make charity organizations, you're a member of them, called churches, and then at your expense they use the taxation service to drain you while they get free cash and they live like gods on the earth. In the Netherlands, you have this guy called Maasbach. I'm not going to mention his full name so that YouTube doesn't come do stupid stuff over here. But you have this Maasbach cult who's doing the same thing as the black church are doing in the United States, scamming the people. That's all they do. They're scamming the people. Oh, and there's another thing I need to warn you about those pagan churches. Because remember, it's a paranormal operation. And as I mentioned before, Satan always comes to collect. Anything you achieve with the paranormal will have a side effect with it inherently, because the paranormal is negative. The paranormal is a bunch of contaminated spirits together. So anything you achieve with the aid of paranormal will have some contamination that haunts it. Every pagan knows this. So what goes on now is that you have those pagan pastors, we have those pagan churches where they trap you through indoctrination to be trapped there. And here's the thing. Not only are you financially and economically scammed and drained, you also end up receiving their plagues and side effects. Because whatever charm it is they're using will have side effects, but they can transfer those side effects onto the congregation. That's why you have people that join pagan churches and eventually they die of cancer or they die of tumors or die of car accidents or they commit suicide or whatever. And then you ask, how come they've gone to church loyal for so many years? Yet they have all this bad stuff happening to them out of the blue. I'm telling you what goes on. You attend a pagan church, which is a paranormal project of that pagan pastor, and the pastor gets the benefits. But he also has to deal with the side effects. But the side effects are now falling on you because the negativity keeps hanging around the pagan church. So it can be that you attend the pagan church and eventually you get diseases that afflict your life, or you get all types of violence against afflict you. The side effects that should harm the pagan pastor that made the deal is now haunting you. And the pagan pastor is built out and he's living a relaxed existence behind the scenes. And when there's a funeral, he even arranged a funeral and tells people he's gone to a better place, knowing full well the reason that individual passed away so quickly is because of the side effects that haunts his organization. So, your health and your lifespan are in danger when you involve and invest yourself in those pagan churches. Someone asked me, how many of those pagan pastors you think are Masons? I think the top ones, the ones seen on TV, they're all in Freemasons. Well, whether they're in the Freemasonic fraternity or not doesn't matter. They are still scamming the masses in the name of Christ. And the only way it's going to end is when the believers truly walk in the power and make them irrelevant. Making YouTube videos exposed to them is not going to do it, because many of those expose videos also have false teaching in them. We need to simply walk in the power and make those pagan churches irrelevant. The moment they become irrelevant, they cannot operate anymore. By fighting them, we will make them look like the victim and people will have sympathy for them. By remaining silent, by just fleeing, we will just enable it to happen. We need to shut it down by making them irrelevant. And once they become irrelevant, people come to notice, okay, but why is this pastor having so many expensive cars while some of the people in the congregation are starving? If we walk in the power and we establish Christ-centered economies, then people will see that everyone in this economy benefits, and people will say, oh, in pagan church, it's the same thing as in the corporate world. So that is what we do. Mm-hmm. So there are real believers involved in pagan Christianity thinking it's the right thing. They need to be delivered. And only delivered when they see other real believers walking in the power. Because, as I mentioned before earlier in this live stream, the only thing the world offers are null movements or circular movements. Just like Justin Bergman is saying, beliefs are proactive, pigs are recycling and redirecting trauma. That's true. Pagans recycle and redirect whatever there is already. Beliefs are the proactive ones that can actually divert and be dynamic. Now, the masses have been traumatized enough by the world itself. So when pagan church comes to rob them, pagan church love bombs them first and then traps them further. So the masses there in those pagan churches, most of them are just sheep that are being slaughtered. That's what they are. And the thing is, we've left those wolves off the hook for way too long. So when we make those wolves irrelevant, sooner or later, even the common worldlings will turn on them. And here's the good news. Many of those wolves in sheep's clothing have exposed themselves with last US election, giving prophecies with fire, and the prophecies never happened. Even when it was obvious that the prophecy was wrong, instead of repenting openly, they continued. And now suddenly nobody talks about it anymore. They are in denial. That's why that former US presidency, you can consider the gift of God, because it exposed all the wolves in sheep's clothing that pretend to be believers. So now we know what our mission is in daily life. Now we know. So, if believers are not talking about walking in the power, why you keep associating with them? Especially in these times, we need to walk in the power. If you don't walk in the power, you'll be overtaken by the violence of the world. It's one of the two. And that's what's important to know history. Because history is a recycling of conflicts, as I mentioned before, also some of the community posts. Again, the United States of America was based on the Roman Republic. And even ancient pagans destroyed the Roman Republic because they realized the Roman Republic doesn't work. Even Romans decided we don't want a republic and we want an empire. So Benjamin Franklin and I'm not sure if it's Andrew Jackson, but those other so-called founding fathers of the United States, they created a country based on a model that wouldn't work, knowing full well that the country will eventually crash because it is based on a model that never worked. Why did they do it anyway? Because they could keep black folks down. That's why they did it. So they created a whole country, impoverishing many of their own white folks. And what people don't know is that after independence of the United States, many white young men died in prison camps because they couldn't pay the taxes that the new administration required. They died in concentration camps. They did all of that, establishing a country that couldn't work just to keep black folks down. And the same thing, and that's why the United States is history. Because the Roman Republic crashed due to civil wars, because of the differences between the areas, the same thing is working out in the United States now. So the United States is the same old Republican conflict that's playing out right now. And all the US presidents were aware of this. But they all got along with the game. And what happened when the Roman Republic crashed? It was overtaken by the empire with a firm dictatorship. And the same thing will happen worldwide, and it's already playing out. A worldwide dictatorship that's unfolding right now. So those that know history understand that this is where things are heading. But here's the thing. When that worldwide dictatorship was established, Christ came. And he gave us the tools on what to do. So right now that this dictatorship is worked out again, we know what to do. And we're far better off now than when Christ first walked the earth. Because now there are tens of millions of us all over the earth. The beast system shouldn't even be taken seriously by believers. It should only be considered because it's something we're dealing with in daily life, but apart from that, it shouldn't even be taken seriously. Listen, if you are from the United States, that country of yours was never a Christian nation to begin with. It was based on bloodshed of killing white boys. There were many white British boys killed by George Washington and all those folks, just established a country. They don't talk about that. The United States is a Baphomet administration based on Greco-Roman Masonic traditions, and it was meant to fail anyway. The United States was a time bomb from the time it received its independence from Great Britain. It was a time bomb that would have gone off, and they knew about it. And that time bomb went off a few times already, and it's going to go off again. And that's why we need to pretend like it's a land of great opportunities for whom? And here's one thing I want you to understand, believers. Many Asians after the Second World War realized this about the United States, that it was one big time bomb from the start. So what did? they send their sons to the United States to get an education and start businesses. And when their sons got wealth, they brought back wealth to their homelands and built their homelands up. They used the United States as a prostitute. They used the United States as a whore, benefiting from her. And now they are bonding her. And now the United States is an abundant thought. They still think she's hot. That's what the United States is. She's an elderly, abundant thought that still thinks she's hot, and all the young men want her. Nobody wants it. That's the United States now. And that's why the United States now is escalating, because it thinks it's still hot, but it's not. It's really not, but it thinks it's hot. And it can't handle that it's not at the moment. So let that hoe die. Please, let the hoe die. None of her lovers want to benefit from her anymore, because not really much more to benefit. Let the hoe die. Please don't have faith nor sympathy on her. Meanwhile, focus on your own households to become better. I'm not sure when the United States completely falls, and it shouldn't concern me nor you. You should be active anyway, believer. So, are there any questions? Let me know in the live chat. I'm here anyway for a moment, so I'll be able to answer some questions relating to this topic. Steve E. I know about Albert Pike. He was a grand wizard. Yes, he was a wizard. He spoke around 16 ancient languages fluently. So, but this guy was at the Confederate site. But when the Union won, they built a statue for him. That shows you that the whole conflict of this American Civil War was just a conflict on how to oppress the rest of the world in North America. Not a conflict of really them going off at each other. It's really a conflict how to do it. But they all were on accord that they had to do it. Are there any questions here relating to this topic? Let me know in the live chat. Amen. So, are you encouraged, believers? Justin's telling the truth. I need to mention this also, because many don't know about this history. Many of the Nazis never faced prosecution for their crimes against humanity. Instead, under Operation Paperclip, by the I'm not sure if it was the FBI or CIA, but under Operation Paperclip, yes, it was Paperclip, not Paperclip, Paperclip, they were transferred to the United States. They got American citizenship, and they joined American institutions. Werner von Braun became the founder of NASA. He was a Nazi scientist. Werner von Braun. Look it up for yourself. It's not a conspiracy theory. And it's even declassified. You can find it out. So, the Nazi administration was transferred to the United States, and it continued in various other institutions. And there were many German Americans already, so they could easily mingle in. That's why under the Trump administration, you had many neo-Nazis appearing, and you would think, where did all neo-Nazis get from? It is because their Nazi ancestors moved to the United States and they brought their Nazi ideology with them. Look at this. The United States claimed that they fought against Nazism to free Europe, but they paid and sponsored Nazi criminals to become American citizens and to continue life in the United States. And they brought their Nazi ideology with them to the United States. And what people don't know is that many white Americans were proud sponsors financially of Hitler's party. They were. They saw Hitler as the new savior of white imperialism. What Adolf's cult was a very direct suicide cult, and they destroyed Western imperialism for good. And it was a big embarrassment to the beast system. So now they had to cover up the embarrassment because it was mainly Muslims that built them out. So then America had to become this freedom fighter for the world. And they paid many of the Nazis that were left to go to the United States and to just have to do a makeup change. So NASA is a continuation of the Nazi scientific projects that were going on. But a lot of people perceive NASA to be this great American institution to explore space. It is not. What white supremacy did was it removed the British flags and put the American flags instead. But they put American flags in American military bases, not all over the place. So because they didn't put American flags all over the place, people thought, no, we're not colonized. No, they were not colonized, but still had American flag over there as the replacement of the British flag. So the British Empire collapsed, and you had the American military superpower that came in its place to continue white supremacy. That's what they did. So, true. Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Henry Ford, all of them were part of it. They were all in on it together. So actually, the Nazi cult was not punished nor dealt with after the Second World War. That's a scam they're telling pupils in high school, just so they can get sympathy for society. It didn't happen. And also the Japanese aristocracy, which was self-destructing Asia all over the place, they were also not dealt with. Name me one Japanese aristocratic house that was made poor as a punishment for their participation in genocide in Asia. You couldn't mention me any of them because it didn't happen. Many of the bootlicks in Vietnam, Korea, and China, Manchuria, and all those other places that assisted the Japanese military, they were also not dealt with. So the only ones that were punished were the rent boys that did some of the dirty job. They were the ones that were hanged. One or two great Nazi figures or one Japanese general was punished. That's it. But the deep core of the darkness was just relocated and received a makeup change. The Japanese aristocracy is still in power today, but they use business titles instead of their aristocratic noble titles, like they used to, and still have their grip in many economies all over Asia. And Nazism has resurfaced in neo-Nazism in various fronts on the right-wing politics. So when you hear about the Second World War and how Nazism was defeated and all of that, it was, let me say like this, the self-destruction was stopped by the Muslims intervening. That's what happened. And there were also black folks from the United States that joined the US military that helped with the intervention. I don't know why why we did that. We shouldn't have done it. But okay, some of us were so desperate for recognition, we did it. It was only relocated. And right now, they're doing another relocation. That's what's going on right now. They are relocating some of their assets to continue the same darkness as it was before. The Japanese aristocracy is still there. Their descendants are still uncoded on what their ancestors did to the rest of Asia. The bootleg families throughout Asia are also in place. Now, South Korea did afflict and punish some of the descendants of collaborators with the Japanese, but that was just on a tiny part. White supremacy has already run out of their plans. That's why they need to keep recycling their plans, because white supremacy already played out. They played out all their tricks already. They just recycled the tricks, hoping that the new generation doesn't know history. Because as long as you don't know history, you won't recognize when they are repeating the same crap. But those who know history will recognize crap and say no against it. That's why they put a lot of effort in miseducating the youth, so that the youth doesn't recognize that it's the old thing they're bringing back. So, while a lot of folks were fighting against Biden versus Trump, or while many folks were fighting over Antifa against Trump supporters, where many folks were fighting about in Britain about Brexit or the EU membership, when we were fighting about all those other artificial conflicts, the Apollonians and those Apollonian families have all been relocating their assets, and now they're at ease. Because they know when everything crashes down and commerce turn on one another, their assets are secured. And here's another thing you need to realize. Many people became wealthy with collaborating with the Nazis, both in Europe and outside of it. And many of those descendants of people that collaborated with the Nazis, they also have relocated their assets right now because they're about to be discovered. So if the people at the dark side who are involved with this great whore called Babylon, if they are realistic about building and relocating assets, why aren't we believers learning from it? Why aren't we outdoing them? And don't be mistaken, we do have influence. We do have an impact. What Pagan church told you that is useless because the beast is going to win, the only reason the beast was able to overcome many believers was because those believers were not actually operating fully in faith. What we believers should do is we should build our own local economies worldwide, and then we trade with one another in that economic network. And that's how we build strengths together, powered by the Holy Spirit, against the beast system. That's what we do. We don't need militaries. We don't need all those structural violence. We can just do it powered by faith. And their own violence will destroy them when they come after us. Just like the apostles did it. That's how we should do. Most of the New Testament is nation building for believers in building strong local economies. That's what the Apostle Paul was doing. But in pagan church, they abuse most of New Testament just to keep you going to church and expecting to go to heaven, instead of realizing that we're meant to work out heaven on earth. Why do you think that we have all those lockdowns going on and curfews? By keeping people at home and scaring people to go outside because we catch this deadly virus, they now can relocate everything very quickly. If you have convoys transporting gold, silver, and all that right now at night, nobody notices it because everyone keeps staying inside. So the public is complying with the so-called reset that goes on, and they're not even aware of it. So while a lot of worldly people think they're being good people by following all those restrictions of their leaders, they're actually being robbed more and more. The masses have already been robbed a lot, but they're being robbed even more right as we speak. Their businesses are being destroyed. The aviation industry has suffered a lot. They are restricted from traveling, so they are being robbed and destroyed. But because they have Netflix, because they can go to YouTube and watch funny videos, because they have porn websites, because they have all those relief mechanisms, they think they're fine. Later in this decade, when it becomes obvious that they have almost no financial means left, now they will say, you know what, we don't have any financial means left, so let's have a social credit system. At least then we can start over. And the social credit system is what the Apollonians wanted all along. But they knew that if they would come this social credit system in 2008 under Obama's presidency, you would say, no, what is this? But now that everything has crashed, now that a lot of people are so depressed and so fed up with everything, now people are more willing to accept it. And this is a social credit system we want to implement worldwide. They've been testing this in China already. This is how it goes. The whole world will go on credit. Money will not be used anymore. It's credit that will be used. Okay? So non-existent money on screens will be used. You will still be able to get cash, but cash will be rare. And in this social credit system, it goes like this. If you purchase goods of your own country, if you talk friendly on the phone, if you dress a certain way, you get a higher credit score. And the higher credit score, the more you're able to do. So if you want to rent an apartment together with your significant other, they will check your credit system. If your husband or your boyfriend has a low credit score, they'll tell you can't rent an apartment. Or you can rent an apartment with another man. So you need to leave that man and go with another man, then you can get an apartment. Stop paying attention to rumors. Oh, they may use this, they may use that. Those are things to boast fear inside of you. I'm just telling you what they want to do. Oh, so you want to go on holiday to the Bahamas? Oh, you're a U.S. citizen, right? Oh, you spoke on social media against Biden. Oh, I'm sorry, but low credit score. That means your passport is blocked. You can't board an airplane. Oh, you want to get a job, but you don't support abortion? Yeah, I'm sorry, but you're anti-female. Okay, you get a blockade, and then you apply for a job. You can't get a job, and you end up on welfare, having very few money, almost no money at all. So then okay, then I must agree with abortion. Then I'll be able to get a job. That's how it's going to be. However, believers with our own local strong economies will be able to live at peace, glorifying Christ despite all of this. And that's why we need to get out of those pagan churches, because those pagan churches are there to condition us to accept this social credit system. So let us walk in abundance. In China, you already have a social credit system, and they want to advance it and put it worldwide. And that's why they first want Islamic economy. They want Islamic economics to take over. And slowly, when Islamic economics has taken over, people are more collectivized, then the social credit system is pushed in at the same time. So Islam will be the tool used to usher in this social credit system. So now you know what's going to happen in the coming years. Now you know what the conflict is going to be. And no, I've not visited China, and I'm not sure if I'm interested in visiting that place. Not only because of their anti-black racism that they're very blunt about, but also that place, I don't see any benefit in me visiting it unless Holy Spirit says, and it says different to me. I'm close to China anyway now, so if Holy Spirit wants me to visit it, I will. If not, I won't. So keep on walking by faith, believers, and be at peace.